You become aware of the morning not through any sudden sound, but through the slow change in the darkness behind your closed eyes, a shift from the deep black of night to a softer grey that feels like the first light pressing gently against the room. The room itself is small and high up, tucked under the angled roof beams of an insula that faces the harbour. And in these earliest moments the air still holds the coolness that gathered during the night, a coolness that seems to seep through the whitewashed plaster and settle on your skin with a faint touch of dampness. There is no urgency in the waking, no alarm or call, only the gradual return of your senses to the world outside your rest. Your eyes open slowly and find the narrow window set into the wall beside your bed, a rectangle cut through the thick stone that frames the day beyond. Through it the sky shows as a pale wash of colour that is not yet blue, but more the colour of watered milk, thin and luminous, with a few faint streaks of cloud that seem motionless in the high air. The window has no glass, only a wooden shutter that you left open in the warmer months, and through it comes a constant, quiet breath of moving air that carries the mingled scents of the sea below, salt and wet stone, and the subtle, clean smell of distant pines that grow on the dunes beyond the river mouth. You lie still for a while longer, letting your body remain heavy on the thin mattress stuffed with wool, your arms resting at your sides, your legs stretched out under the single linen sheet that has grown warm from your sleep. The room is so familiar that you do not need to look around to know it. The whitewashed walls that show fine cracks running like the veins of a leaf, the single peg on the wall holding your spare tunic, the small clay lamp sitting cold on the wooden stool by your bed, the rough planks of the floor worn smooth in a path that leads from the bed to the door. Above you the ceiling beams, dark with age and cut from pine trunks, run straight across the space, and in the corner near the roof angle a small spider has built a web that trembles almost invisibly in the draught. When you finally sit up, the sheet slides away, and the cool air wraps around your shoulders and arms, a brief sensation that is not unpleasant, but simply part of the day beginning. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and place your bare feet on the floorboards, feeling the grain of the wood against your soles, the slight chill of the planks that have not yet been touched by the sun. Standing is a slow action, your body still loose from sleep, and you cross the small room in 3 steps to reach the earthenware basin that sits on a low stand against the wall. A small jug of water stands beside it, the clay surface beaded with condensation from the cool night, and you pour a thin stream into the basin, the sound a soft trickle that seems loud only because the rest of the world is so quiet. You cup the water in your hands and splash it onto your face, the coolness bringing a sharper sense of alertness. Then you run wet fingers through your short hair, smoothing it back from your forehead and temples. There is no mirror, no need to see yourself. You know the face by touch alone, the lines, the corners of your eyes from years of squinting into the sun on open water, the roughness of a jaw that needs no shaving today. Dressing is a sequence of small, unhurried motions that you perform every morning without thought. Your tunic hangs from a peg on the wall, a simple garment of undyed wool the colour of oatmeal, woven in the loose plain weave that has softened with many washings. You lift it from the peg and the wool is cool to the touch, smelling faintly of the sea breeze that dried it the previous day. Pulling it over your head, you settle the fabric across your shoulders and let it fall around your body to just above the knees, adjusting the folds so that they hang straight and easy. A leather cord, serves as a belt, and you tie it around your waist with a single knot, the leather supple and worn dark where your hands always grip it. Next come the sandals, a pair of simple leather soles with straps that cross over the instep and wrap around the ankle, fastened with a small bronze buckle that has turned greenish in places from the salt air. You sit on the edge of the bed to put them on, bending to guide the straps over your feet, the leather cool against your skin, and you tighten the buckles just enough to hold them secure without pinching. Once you are dressed, you turn to the small shelf by the door where your daily provisions wait. A cloth bag made of coarse linen lies folded next to a clay flask stoppered with a cork of twisted rag, and beside it sits the small bundle of your day's food wrapped in a clean piece of cloth. You take the flask first and lift it, feeling the weight of the fresh water you drew from the public fountain the evening before, and you tuck it into the bag. Then you open the cloth bundle and check its contents. A flat round of dark bread, baked yesterday, so that it is now firm but not stale. A small handful of black olives, shiny with their own oil, their skin wrinkled and tight. A piece of hard cheese wrapped separately in a fig leaf, pale yellow and slightly crumbly at the edges. You add these to the bag, tying the cloth to keep everything together, and then you roll the top of the linen bag closed and sling its carrying strap over your shoulder so that it rests against your hip. There is nothing else to gather, no tools needed yet, for those wait on the boat below. You pause for a moment by the window and look out at the morning, which has shifted its color during the time you were dressing, the pale milk grey now touched with faint gold along the horizon, where the sun is rising somewhere beyond the land. From this height you can see a portion of the harbour basin, the water a flat sheet of silver that moves only in gentle ripples, and beyond it the darker line of the sea merging with the sky. The silhouettes of masts rise from the merchant ships anchored at the quays, straight and still, their rigging invisible in the distance, but their shapes known to you by heart. A single gull crosses the window frame, its wings beating slowly, and you hear its cry, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, hanging in the air after the bird has passed. You turn from the window and cross to the door, a wooden panel set into the wall with an iron latch that lifts easily under your thumb. The door opens inward, and you step out onto the small landing at the top of a narrow staircase that leads down through the center of the insula. The stairwell is dim, lit only by small slit windows at each floor, and the steps are worn concave in the middle from countless feet over many years. You descend slowly, your sandals making a soft scuffing sound on the stone, and your free hand trails along the wall, which is cool and slightly rough under your fingertips, the plaster chipped in places to reveal the brick beneath. On the floor below yours you pass a closed door behind which you hear the faint murmur of voices, perhaps a family beginning their own day, and you continue down without pause, the sound of your steps echoing softly in the enclosed space. At the ground floor you emerge into the narrow street that runs along the front of the building, a street paved with large irregular stones fitted together like a puzzle, their surfaces worn smooth by the passage of carts and feet. The street is very quiet at this hour, still deep in shadow because the buildings on either side stand close and tall, blocking the direct light of the rising sun. You stand for a moment just outside the doorway, breathing in the air that now carries more layers of scent, the sharp tang of the sea, the faint smokiness of a distant oven firing, the dusty smell of dry grain from the warehouse. 2 streets over, the clean dampness of stone that has not yet dried from the night. The air is cool enough that you can see a slight puff of your breath when you exhale slowly, but it is not cold, only fresh and new. You begin to walk, your route so familiar that your feet find the way without any need for decision. The street takes you past the front of a pottery workshop, its wooden shutters still closed and barred for the night. The display shelf outside empty of the usual red gloss bowls and oil lamps that will later be set out to catch the eye of passers-by. Next comes a small shrine set into a niche in the wall, a simple alcove holding a worn stone figure whose features are softened by weather, and at its base someone has placed a tiny clay cup holding a sprig of dried rosemary, the leaves still faintly fragrant. You do not stop, but you notice these things as you pass, the way you notice the small weeds growing between the paving stones, the way a stray cat slips from behind an overturned crate and disappears into a drain opening without a sound. The street opens out slightly as you approach the edge of the district where the warehouses begin, and here the buildings change from the close-packed insulae to larger, more solid structures built of tufa blocks and brick, their walls rising high and windowless. Great storage jars, amphorae, stand in rows against these walls, some stacked on their sides in wooden racks, others standing upright with their pointed bases set into the earth. They are terracotta-colored, some darker with age and some still showing the reddish blush of recent firing, and their surfaces are stamped with the marks of the merchants who own them, letters and symbols pressed into the clay before firing. The sight of these amphorae is as much a part of your morning as the sky or the street, a fixed element of the landscape that you pass every day without needing to think about it. Beyond the warehouse district, the street curves gently to the left, and the view opens up to reveal the harbor basin itself, a wide expanse of water that gleams now with the first direct light of the sun, which has just cleared the low hills to the east. The light falls across the water in a path of pale gold, broken by ripples into 1,000 shifting fragments of brightness. The quay stretches out before you, a stone-paved platform that runs along the water's edge, punctuated by iron mooring rings set at regular intervals. Several small boats are tied up there, including your own, and beyond them the larger merchant ships ride at anchor in the deeper water of the outer harbour, their hulls dark and solid against the brightness. You walk out onto the quay, your footsteps now sounding different, on the larger, flatter stones, and the breeze coming off the water is steady and cool, stirring your tunic and touching your face with a light, damp breath. The sound of the harbour is a low, continuous murmur made up of many small sounds, the gentle slap of water against the stone quay, the creak of timber from a boat rocking slowly at its mooring, the distant call of a sailor from across the basin, the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface and disappearing again. Gulls stand on the mooring posts and watch you with their head-tilted curiosity, their grey and white plumage neat and their yellow eyes unblinking, and they take no notice as you pass except to shift their weight slightly from one leg to the other. Your boat is there at the end of a short wooden dock that extends from the main quay, a small craft built of pine planks that have weathered to a silvery grey, the grain of the wood raised and soft from years of salt water. You step onto the dock and feel the slight give of the planks under your weight, a gentle spring that you know well. The boat floats below you, its gunwales just above the level of the dock, and you can see inside it the familiar shapes of your fishing gear, the oars resting along the thwarts, the coiled ropes, the wicker baskets nested one inside the other, the leather bailer tucked under the stern seat. The cast net is there too, folded into a neat mound and covered with a piece of old sailcloth to protect it from the morning dew, and you can see the outline of the lead weights pressing against the cloth. You do not step aboard yet. Instead, you stand at the edge of the dock, facing the water, and let the fullness of the morning settle around you. The sky is now a warm pale gold that grades upward into a soft, cloudless blue, the kind of blue that promises a long, still day. The sun is still low enough to cast long shadows, and the shadow of your own body stretches out over the water, a dark shape that moves with you whenever you shift your weight. The whole harbour seems to be waking very slowly around you, with no hurry in any of its movements, and you feel yourself part of that slow rhythm, a single figure in a scene that has repeated in much the same way for generations. After a time you step down into the boat to begin the next part of your day, but the transition is so smooth, so natural, that it feels less like an action and more like the morning simply continuing. You step down from the wooden dock onto the boat, a movement you have made so many times that your body completes it without any pause or adjustment, one foot finding the center line of the hull while your hand reaches out to steady itself against the gunwale. The boat receives your weight with a gentle, predictable shift, settling slightly deeper into the water and then steadying almost at once, the hull pressing back against the soles of your sandals with a firm, quiet resistance. This is your boat, a small, flat-bottomed fishing craft built from pine planks that were cut and shaped long before you first took them out on the water, the wood now weathered to a silver-grey patina that changes its shade depending on where the light strikes. In the direct morning sun, the planks gleam softly, almost pale, while in the shadows under the thwarts they deepen to a cool, darker tone that holds the memory of many nights afloat. The entire vessel is held together by wooden pegs and copper nails. The nails now green with a fine crust of verdigris that has formed slowly over years of salt spray, and the seams between the planks are filled with a caulking of pitch mixed with fine hemp fibers, a black, slightly tacky line that you can feel with your fingernail if you press against it. You stand for a moment simply feeling the boat under you, the way a slight swell passing through the harbour makes the hull rise and fall by no more than a finger's width, a motion so subtle that you notice it only because you are paying attention to nothing else. The gunwale runs around the entire perimeter, a single continuous rail of oak that was steamed and bent into shape before being fastened to the top edges of the hull planks, and you let your hand rest on it, the wood worn perfectly smooth where countless hands and rope lines have polished it over the years. Moving your palm slowly along its length, you feel the change in texture from the glassy smooth upper curve to the very slight grain ridges that remain on the inner face, ridges that run parallel like the lines in an open palm. The wood is cool under your touch, having not yet absorbed the full warmth of the rising sun, and a faint trace of moisture clings to it from the overnight dew, enough to make your fingers slide slightly before catching on the dry grain. You turn your attention now to the inside of the boat, beginning a slow, careful inspection that is less about finding anything wrong and more about reacquainting yourself with every detail, as if the boat and its gear were an extension of your own limbs that needed to be flexed and tested before the day's work. The two oars lie along the length of the hull, their shafts resting across the three thwarts that divide the boat into its working spaces, and the oar blades, broad and leaf-shaped, are tucked toward the bow. Each oar is made from a single piece of ash, a wood, chosen for its straight grain and the way it bends without breaking, and the shafts have been smoothed by the friction of your hands until they feel almost silky, the natural color of the wood, a warm honey brown where it is not darkened by the oil from your skin. You lift one oar just enough to feel its weight, the balance point resting easily across your palm, and you note the small leather collar wrapped and stitched around the shaft where it would rub against the oarlock, the leather dry and cracked but still holding firm. Setting it down again, you let your fingers trail over the blade, tracing the slight chamfer along its edge that helps it enter the water cleanly, and the blade is thin enough that when you hold it up to the light, you can just see the shadow of your hand through the pale wood. The thwarts themselves are simple planks of pine, thicker than the hull planks, and they are notched into the sides of the boat where they serve as both seats and structural braces. You run your hand along the nearest thwart, feeling the shallow depression in the center where countless hours of sitting have compressed the wood fibers, creating a subtle curve that fits the shape of your body. The surface is smooth but not polished, the grain still holding a faint tooth that catches on the rougher skin of your fingertips, and a few small splinters have lifted near one edge, not enough to be a hazard, but enough that you make a mental note to smooth them with a piece of pumice later. The forward thwart has a small crack running diagonally from one corner, a crack that has been there for as long as you can remember and has never widened, sealed inside by the same dark pitch that fills the hull seams, and you press your thumb against it as you always do, satisfied that it remains unchanged. Beneath the stern thwart, in the small triangular space where the hull narrows, you find the coiled ropes. There are 3 lines in total, each wound into a tight, flat coil, and secured with a loop of thinner cord to keep them from tangling. And they are made of twisted hemp fibers that have aged to a warm, dusty brown. You lift the first coil, the mooring line, and feel its weight settle into your hand, the rope thick as your thumb and stiff with salt, but still flexible enough to bend smoothly. The strands are composed of many smaller fibers twisted together in a regular pattern that spirals from end to end, and here and there a single fiber has broken and sprung free, curling away from the rope like a tiny spring. The second coil is the smaller hand line used for tying off the net or making quick repairs, and it is much thinner, soft, and almost fuzzy from wear, with a frayed end that you have sinned closed with a flame long ago, so that it will not unravel further. The third coil is the longest, the spare line still relatively new and lighter in color, and it smells faintly of the vegetable tar used to preserve the hemp against rot, the smell that is sharp and green and clean, entirely unlike the salt and fish scent of the older ropes. Next to the coiled ropes, the leather baler sits tucked into a corner, its opening facing upward like a thirsty mouth. It is made from a single piece of thick cowhide, shaped by soaking and stretching over a wooden form until it hardened into a bucket shape with a flat bottom and flared sides, and a wooden handle is riveted to one side with 2 copper rivets whose heads have worn thin and smooth. The leather itself is nearly black in places where water has repeatedly soaked and dried, the surface marked with tiny cracks that form a web of fine lines like a dried mudflat. And when you lift it, the baler is surprisingly light, the leather stiff but not brittle, still holding its shape perfectly. The inside is rougher, the suede side of the hide, and there is a faint chalky residue from evaporated seawater, a white bloom that dusts your fingertips when you touch it. Stacked one inside the other beneath the forward thwart, The wicker baskets wait for the day's catch. They are made of willow withies woven in a simple over-under pattern. The withies split lengthwise to make flat, flexible strips that curve around the basket's form and are lashed at the rim with a thicker withy bound in place by thin cord. The baskets are different sizes, the largest wide and shallow, meant for spreading fish in a single layer, while the smaller ones are deeper, meant for carrying the catch to the fishmonger. You separate them, lifting each one out and setting it on the floorboards, and the withies are dry and light, the color of pale straw where they have been sheltered from the sun, darker and more honeyed on the rims where your hands always grip. A few have splintered slightly at the edges, and one has a broken withy that pokes outward like a stiff whisker, but they are all sound, they're weaved tight, and their bottoms solid. The sound they make when you set them down is a soft, hollow clatter, the withies clicking against each other, and the smell of the baskets is the clean, grassy smell of dried willow mixed with the older, fainter smell of many fish that have rested inside them over the seasons. Now at last you turn to the stern, where the cast net lies folded under its piece of old sailcloth. You pull the cloth away carefully, revealing the net underneath. A circular expanse of mesh made from fine linen cord that has been dyed a soft, brownish green to make it less visible in the water, the color of seaweed shadows. The net is arranged in precise folds, each layer lying flat over the one beneath, so that the whole forms a low, dense mound, and from the outer edge of the mound the lead weights hang down in a fringe that spills slightly over the side of the fold. You kneel beside it on the floorboards, the wood pressing against your shins, and you lift a section of the rim with both hands, feeling immediately the gentle, continuous weight of the small lead beads that are sewn into the hem at regular intervals. Each bead is roughly the size of a grape, cast in a simple mold that leaves a faint seam around its equator, and the metal is dark gray, almost the color of the sea on an overcast day, with a soft, matte surface that has oxidized slightly over time, leaving a pale gray powder that rubs off on your skin. The beads are cool to the touch, noticeably cooler than the air or the wood of the boat, and when you lift them, they click softly together, a sound like tiny pebbles stirred by a gentle wave, a sound that you have heard so often it has become part of the background of your days. You work your way around the rim, lifting small sections of the net and letting them fall back, checking that each bead is still securely fastened inside its pocket of netting, that none of the thin cords that hold them have frayed or broken. Your fingers find the small stitches, regular and tight, the cord waxed to resist wear, and you trace one bead's pocket from end to end, satisfied by the way the mesh cups it perfectly, without any looseness. From the leaded hem, the net rises in whitening rings of mesh, the openings diamond-shaped and each about the width of 2 fingers, large enough to let the water flow through easily, but small enough to catch any fish of keeping size. You pull a fold of the netting upward and spread it between your hands, holding it against the light so that you can see the pattern clearly, and the mesh is remarkably even, each knot identical to its neighbors, the cord thin and strong and still slightly stiff from the last drying. The knots are simple sheet bends, tied and drawn tight by the net maker's hands, and where 2 cords meet you can see the tiny twists that lock them together, the ends trimmed short so that they barely protrude. You let the netting slide through your fingers, feeling the dry rasp of the linen, and as you do, you watch for any broken strands, any knots that have slipped, but there are none. The net is in good condition, as it almost always is, because you repair any damage as soon as you see it and never let the net sit tangled or torn. The center of the net is gathered into a hand loop, a reinforced circle of heavier cord that you will hold when you make the cast, and from this loop a longer hand line runs, coiled now in a separate figure eight beside the folded net. You take up the hand line and stretch it lightly between your hands, testing its strength with a steady pull that makes the fibers creak almost inaudibly, and it holds without giving. The line is smooth from long use, the hemp fibers polished down to a uniform surface, and the end that attaches to the net's center loop has a small wooden toggle that you check with a tug, finding the knot firm and the toggle seated tightly. With the inspection complete, you gather the net's folds back into their neat mound, tucking the lead line under the top layer so that it cannot tangle, and you replace the sailcloth cover, pulling it snug and smoothing it flat with your palm. The cloth is heavy canvas, once a lighter tan, but now stained with darker patches where fish slime and seawater have left their marks, and the edges are frayed into a soft fringe of loose threads that you sometimes twist between your fingers absently while drifting between casts. The smell of the canvas is a mixture of salt, old fish, and the faint, almost sweet scent of the linseed oil that was used to waterproof it long ago. A smell that is so familiar to you that you would not be able to describe it to anyone who had not spent time in a small boat. You rise from your kneeling position, feeling the slight protest of your knees and the way your back straightens with a soft pull of muscles that have not yet fully loosened from sleep, and you take a final look around the interior of the boat. Everything is in its place, every tool and piece of equipment exactly where you left it the evening before, and the boat itself is tidy and ready, the floorboards swept clean of any debris, the few dried fish scales that had clung to the wood already blown away by the morning breeze. Above you, the sky has continued its slow brightening, the blue now deeper and fuller, and the sun has climbed high enough to warm the air noticeably, drawing from the planks a faint, clean scent of heated pine resin that mingles with the salt and the distant smoke of the waking city. The harbor sounds have grown a little louder too, with more voices from the quay, the occasional creak of an oar in its lock, and the splash of a net being shaken out somewhere across the basin. But these sounds remain soft and distant, part of the texture of the morning rather than interruptions to it. You stand in the gently rocking boat, your hand resting once more on the smooth gunwale, and you let the quiet settle around you again before reaching for the oars to begin the slow pull-out toward the fishing grounds, knowing that everything is ready, that the boat and all its gear are as they should be, and that the day ahead holds nothing but the steady repetition of the work you know so well. You reach for the mooring line where it loops around the iron ring set into the stone dock, the rope's coarse fibers pressing into your palm as you work the knot loose. The knot is a simple one, a pair of half hitches that you have tied and untied so many times that your fingers can undo it without your eyes needing to guide them, and the hemp gives way with a soft, reluctant creak as the tension comes off. You draw the line toward you, the rope sliding over the gunwale with a low whisper, and you coil it in a loose, flat circle that you tuck under the stern thwart beside the other ropes, where it will stay until you need it again at the end of the day. The boat, now freed from its single attachment to the land, begins a slow drifting motion, nudged by the slight swell that always moves through the harbor. A swell so gentle that it is more a suggestion of movement than an actual displacement, a lazy rotation that turns the bow a few degrees to port and then pauses as if thinking, then drifts back. You take up one of the oars from where it rests along the thwarts and slide its shaft out over the side, fitting the leather collar into the U-shaped notch cut into the gunwale that serves as your oarlock. The fit is snug but not tight, the leather pressing into the wood with a soft, muffled sound, and you settle your grip on the handle, the wood warm now from the sun that has been climbing while you prepared the boat. With a single unhurried push against the dock's edge, you shove the boat away, the hull scraping softly against the stone and then coming free, and you feel the immediate change as the craft begins to float in earnest, no longer tethered, entirely supported by the water that now surrounds it on all sides. The harbour basin opens around you as you seat yourself on the centre thwart, facing the stern so that you can row forward, and you slip the second oar into its notch before leaning into the first slow stroke. The blades dip into the water with a sound that is not a splash but a clean, deep insertion, the wood slicing through the surface and then pulling against the resistance of the sea, and you feel the boat answer by sliding forward, a smooth, almost silent glide that leaves a gentle swirl of tiny bubbles on either side of the hull. You let the oars rise, feather them flat so that the blades skim just above the surface on the return, and then dip them again, each stroke a measured, rhythmic cycle that your body performs without any conscious counting, the beat as steady and unhurried as a resting pulse. The water in the harbour is a pale milky green near the quay, stirred by the passage of many keels and the outflow of the city's drains, and you can see down into its cloudy depths for perhaps an arm's length before everything fades into a soft, indistinct gloom. Small bits of flotsam drift here, a splinter of wood, a tuft of wool, a single olive pit floating like a tiny brown boat, and these things bob and spin in the swirl of your oar strokes before drifting away again. A fish, silver and small, breaks the surface once just off your port side, leaving a ring of ripples that spread outward in a perfect expanding circle until they are absorbed by the larger, gentler undulations of the basin. Gulls wheel overhead in lazy arcs, their shadows flickering across the water and across the deck of your boat, and they call to one another with their familiar, mewing cries that echo back from the stone walls of the warehouses. You row past the last of the moored fishing boats, their hulls rising and falling with the water's slow breath, their nets hung over poles to dry in the morning air, the mesh catching the light and glinting as if dusted with tiny dewdrops. One boat has a small boy sitting in its bow, a child perhaps 6 or 7 years old, who watches you pass with a solemn, unmoving face, his legs dangling over the side and his bare feet just touching the water, and you lift one hand from the oar handle in a brief, wordless greeting that he returns with a small, silent wave of his own. There is no need for speech, no need for any exchange beyond that simple gesture, and you row on, leaving the boy and his boat behind as the distance between you lengthens and the details of his face blur into the general shape of a child on a boat on a morning. The harbour entrance lies ahead, a wide gap between two long stone moles that extend from the shore like arms reaching out to embrace the arriving ships, and at the end of the northern mole the lighthouse rises, a tall square tower built of brick faced with white marble that glows almost painfully bright in the full morning sun. The lighthouse is many stories high, its sides tapering slightly as it climbs, and at its summit a metal cage holds the great fire that burns through the night, though now, in the daylight, the cage is dark and still, wreathed in a faint, sooty stain that darkens the white stone beneath it. Smoke still rises from the embers in a thin, wavering column, a pale grey ribbon that climbs straight up for a distance before the breeze catches it and bends it away over the sea, where it dissipates into the larger blue emptiness of the sky. You guide the boat toward the center of the entrance channel, where the water deepens and its color begins to change, the milky green of the inner harbor giving way to a clearer, darker tone, a true sea blue tinged with the brownish stain of the river that pours into the bay just beyond the moles. The current becomes noticeable here, a gentle but insistent push that you can feel through the oars, the water suddenly alive with a will of its own that wants to carry the boat sideways toward the southern breakwater. You adjust your stroke without thinking, pulling a little harder with the port oar, feathering the starboard blade to reduce its drag, and the boat answers by straightening its course, the bow pointing now through the exact center of the channel where the water runs deepest and the current is most even. As you pass between the two moles, the scale of the stonework becomes apparent. The huge blocks of tufa fitted together with joints so fine that you could not slide a knife blade between them, their faces roughened by the sea's constant attention, pitted and hollowed in places where the waves have gnawed at the softer stone. Dark ribbons of seaweed cling to the blocks at the waterline, their fronds waving in the current like long green-black hair combed by an invisible hand, and the smell of them reaches you. A rich, salty, mineral smell, the smell of rocks exposed at low tide, of the deep crevices where crabs and small octopuses hide. The stones themselves are grey-brown, the colour of dried mud, but they are speckled with the white droppings of the gulls that roost on them, and in the cracks between the blocks small tufts of samphire have taken root, their fleshy, jointed stems glowing a startling vivid green against the grey stone. Beyond the moles, the water opens out and the river mouth becomes visible, a broad, flat expanse where the Tiber finally meets the sea after its long journey from the hills far inland. The river water is brown, carrying a load of fine silt that clouds its surface and makes it look almost solid, like a slow-flowing flood of thin mud, and it pushes out into the blue sea in a great fan-shaped plume that swirls and folds back on itself in complex, ever-changing patterns. Along the edge where the brown water meets the blue, there is a visible line of turbulence, a narrow roiling zone where the two bodies of water resist one another, the lighter fresh water riding up over the denser salt, and in this zone the surface is broken into countless small choppy wavelets that sparkle in the sun as they catch the light from every angle. The sound here is different too, a soft continuous hissing that comes from the friction of the waters mingling, a hiss overlaid with the gentler rhythmic slap of the waves against the stones of the moles and the distant deeper boom of a larger swell breaking against the seaward face of the breakwater. You stop rowing for a moment and let the boat drift on the edge of the current, shipping the oars so that their blades rest clear of the water while the handles lie across your lap. The boat responds by turning broadside to the flow, and you feel the current take hold, a steady, even pressure against the hull that begins to carry you along at a walking pace. No faster, the shore slipping past on your left with the slow, dreamlike quality of a landscape seen from a drifting boat. You lift the clay flask from your cloth bag and pull the cork, drinking a small amount of the cool, faintly earthy tasting water, and then you replace the cork and set the flask aside, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand and tasting the salt that the breeze has left on your lips. The southern shore of the river mouth is a long, low line of dunes and marsh grass. the dunes pale yellow-grey, the grass a dull olive-green that shifts and ripples in the wind as if it were a second terrestrial sea. Behind the dunes a stand of umbrella pines rises, their trunks dark and straight, their flattened crowns spreading like dark green parasols against the sky, and they are so still in the morning calm that they could be painted onto the backdrop of the world rather than living trees. A few small huts are visible among the pines, their walls of woven reed and their roofs of thatch, and from one of them a thread of smoke rises straight up, the smoke pale blue against the darker green of the trees. You watch the shore slide past with the same quiet, detached attention that you might give to the slow turning of a water wheel or the drifting of clouds, noting the details without needing to name them, letting them become part of the general fabric of the morning. On the northern side, the shore is busier, for there lies the town of Ostia itself, its buildings crowding close to the waterfront in a jumble of tiled roofs and whitewashed walls that climb the gentle slope away from the river. The great warehouses of the grain supplies stand closest to the water, their walls windowless and high, built of brick that has been painted a dull red-brown, and they are fronted by long stone-paved platforms where men and oxen can load and unload the barges that come down the river from Rome. Even from this distance, you can see the tiny figures of workers moving on those platforms, their shapes foreshortened and indistinct, and the sound of their voices carries over the water as a faint, unintelligible murmur, a human counterpoint to the deeper voice of the sea and the river. Behind the warehouses, the rooftops of the town rise in uneven tiers, the red clay tiles glowing warmly in the sun, and here and there a column or a temple pediment rises above the common roof line, its white marble a stark contrast to the earthy tones of the surrounding brick and plaster. The current carries you farther out into the mixing zone, and the boat begins to pitch slightly as it crosses the irregular wavelets where the river and sea collide, a gentle rocking motion that is more soothing than unsettling, like the movement of a cradle rocked by a patient hand. The water beneath you is now a strange marbled blend of brown and blue, the colors swirling together in lazy spirals that open and close, sending out tendrils of clear blue into the brown and vice versa. And if you stare at it for too long, your eyes begin to lose their sense of depth, the patterns seeming to be both on the surface and far below at the same time. Small patches of foam collect along the boundary line, white and frothy, and they drift in clumps that spin slowly as they are tugged by competing currents, lasting for a few minutes before they dissolve back into the water from which they formed. You take up the oars again, not because you need to correct your course, but because the simple act of rowing feels right, the rhythm of it matching the rhythm of the water and the slow, steady movement of the day. The oars dip and rise, and with each stroke you pull the boat a little farther from the shore, angling now toward the open sea where your fishing ground lies, a place you cannot yet see, but know exists, as surely as you know the shape of your own room. The sound of the oarlocks is a soft, regular creak, the wood and leather rubbing together with a note that rises slightly at the end of each stroke and then falls silent during the recovery, a note as predictable and comforting as the tick of a water clock in a quiet room. Water drips from the blades when you feather them, the droplets falling back into the sea with a series of small bright plinks that merge into the larger ambient wash of sound around you. Looking back over your shoulder, you see the harbour entrance receding, the two moles shrinking and the lighthouse tower becoming less a massive structure and more a slender, elegant column, against the pale blue of the morning sky. The smoke from its summit is no longer visible, the breeze having dispersed it entirely, and the marble cladding gleams as a single vertical stripe of white that catches the eye and holds it. The town beyond the harbour is a low brown-grey silhouette, the individual buildings merging into a single mass from which only the largest public structures stand out, and above it all the sky is a vast empty dome of faint blue that seems to grow larger and more encompassing the farther you get from the land. The sun is now well clear of the hills, and its warmth is a steady, pleasant pressure on your shoulders and the back of your neck, a warmth that you have felt so many times that you no longer notice it unless you stop to think about it. The air is still cool enough near the water's surface to keep the heat from feeling oppressive, and the breeze, which has freshened slightly now that you are in open water, moves across your skin with a light, evaporative touch that carries away the faint sweat that has begun to form along your hairline. The smell of the sea is dominant now, that deep, clean, almost metallic scent of salt water and dissolved oxygen, and the faint organic richness of plankton and seaweed. A smell that is the background note of your entire life and that you breathe in without any particular awareness, the way a man breathes the air of his own house. Other boats are out here, scattered across the wide, glittering plain of the water, most of them small fishing craft like your own, though here and there a larger vessel can be seen. A coastal trader with a single square sail hanging limp in the light air, or a barge being towed by a team of oarsmen whose strokes flash in the sun like the beating of metallic wings. One boat is close enough that you can see its occupant clearly, an older man with a deeply tanned face and a head of white curly hair, who stands in his boat casting a hand line over the side with a slow, rhythmic motion that matches your own rowing stroke for stroke. He does not look up as you pass, and you do not call out to him, the distance between you remaining unbreached by any sound other than the steady dipping of your oars and the quiet lapping of the water against both hulls. You row until the shore becomes a low, featureless line on the horizon, a line broken only by the lighthouse tower that still stands visible, even at this distance, a tiny white needle against the haze that has begun to gather near the land. The water around you is now a deep, clear blue-green, the brown stain of the river left behind, and when you stop rowing and let the boat drift, the silence is almost complete, broken only by the slap of a wavelet against the hull, the distant cry of a gull, the faint hiss of your own breathing. The boat rocks gently, the oars resting in their locks, the water slapping softly against the planking, and you sit in the center of this quiet, letting the peace of the open water settle into you, knowing that the fishing ground lies just ahead, that the day's work is about to begin, and that there is no need to rush any part of it. The boat continues to drift on the gentle current as you sit with the oars resting across your lap, the blades dripping the last few drops of water that fall back into the sea, with a quiet, intermittent pattering, the sound so soft that it might be the ticking of a distant clock. The sun is now fully risen, a warm golden-white disk that has climbed above the haze of the horizon and burns in a sky of the palest, most washed-out blue, a sky that seems to hold no clouds at all, only a uniform luminous emptiness that arches from one edge of the world to the other. Around you the water has completed its transition from the milky green of the harbour to the brown-stained mixing zone of the river mouth. And now, as you sit in the quiet with the oars stilled, the sea has become a deep, clear blue-green that is almost the colour of dark bottle glass held up to the light, a color that suggests great depth below. The surface is not flat, but lightly textured by a breeze that moves across it in long, organized lines, cat's paws of darker water that travel steadily toward you and pass under the hull with a faint, almost musical chuckle. The sound of water sliding along the curved planks and releasing a trail of tiny bubbles from the grain of the wood. You shift your weight on the thwart, adjusting your position so that your spine rests more comfortably against the gentle curve that your body has worn into the pine over many seasons, and you take up the oars once more, not because you have any distance left to cover, but because the rhythm of rowing has become its own reason, a steady, meditative motion that keeps you connected to the boat and the water. The oar handles are warm now from the sun, and from the friction of your palms, the wood smooth as polished bone under your fingers, and as you lean forward to dip the blades, you feel the familiar pull of muscles across your back and shoulders, a gentle, satisfying stretch that eases the last trace of stiffness from sleep. The stroke cycle repeats, each phase flowing into the next without any conscious thought on your part. The reach forward, the vertical entry of the blades with a clean slicing sound, the pull through the water with the resistance increasing as the blades bite deeper, the slight pause at the finish, the feathering turn of the wrists, the recovery with the blades skimming a hand's width above the surface, and then the reach again. The boat moves forward at a steady, unhurried pace, leaving behind a narrow V-shaped wake that spreads and flattens within a few boat lengths, dissolving into the general, restless texture of the sea. The shoreline behind you has now receded to a thin, dark ribbon of land that hovers just above the waterline, a ribbon broken into distinct segments by the distance. The harbour mouth is no longer visible as an opening, but as a slight indentation in the line of the coast, and the lighthouse tower is a mere bright speck, a point of white that catches the sun and glints like a tiny star even in full daylight. The town of Ostia is a low brown-grey smear along the shore, its individual buildings completely merged into a single mass, and the smoke from its chimneys and ovens has spread into a pale, diffuse haze that hangs over the land like a thin veil, softening all the edges and making the boundary between earth and sky uncertain. The pines on the dunes are no longer distinguishable as trees. They are a dark, uniform band that marks the transition from the pale sand to the higher ground beyond, and the marsh grass is a dull gold stripe that glimmers faintly when the breeze stirs it. You look at these familiar features without any particular focus, allowing them to be part of the larger composition of the morning shapes and colors that define the edge of your world. Ahead of you, the open sea stretches to the horizon in a vast, slightly curved expanse that seems to go on forever, the water's surface broken here and there by the darker patches that indicate submerged reefs or schools of small fish near the surface, and far off, perhaps a mile or more, you can just make out the ghostly shape of a larger island, its outline a soft blue-grey silhouette that might be either land or a low bank of fog. The water beneath your boat has become so clear that when you pause in your rowing and lean over the side, you can see down for what seems like a very long way, the light penetrating the blue-green depths and revealing the gradual sloping descent of the sea floor. The bottom here is not the muddy, cloudy floor of the river mouth, but a clean, sandy plain that falls away in gentle undulations, the sand a pale creamy white that is dotted with darker patches of seagrass and the occasional shadow of a larger rock. The depth is perhaps 20 or 30 feet, you estimate, though it is hard to be sure because the water magnifies everything and makes distances uncertain, and small fish, silver and quick, dart through the field of your vision, appearing as sudden flashes of light that vanish before you can properly focus on them. You resume rowing, pulling with long, slow strokes that send the boat gliding across the glassy surface, and after a short time you pass the last of the navigation markers that guide ships into the harbor, a large wooden post driven into the seabed and topped with a small weathered plank, painted a faded red, the paint cracked and peeling in long vertical strips that flutter slightly in the breeze. The marker leans a little to one side, tilted by the constant push of the current, or perhaps by the bump of a passing boat, and a small cluster of mussels has attached itself to the submerged portion of the post. Their shells are dark bluish-black that contrasts sharply with the pale wood and the bright silvery water. You steer wide of the marker, giving it the same respectful distance you always do, and as you pass it, you notice that a single cormorant is perched on the very top, its wings spread wide to dry in the sun. The feathers are deep oily black that gleams with iridescent green highlights. The bird watches you with a bright, unblinking eye, its long neck curved in a slight S shape, and it does not move as you row past, remaining as still as a carved figurehead until you are far enough away that it resumes its slow, patient preening. Beyond the marker, the character of the sea changes again, the bottom dropping away more steeply now so that the water deepens rapidly, the pale sandy floor giving way to a darker, more mysterious blue that seems to swallow the light. You can no longer see the bottom, only the deep uniform color that has no visible features, a color that seems to be both empty and full at the same time, holding within it all the hidden life of the sea. The surface, however, remains calm, the breeze having steadied to a light, consistent flow that comes from the northwest, and the waves are small and widely spaced, low swells that lift the boat gently by the bow and then pass under the hull with a slow rocking motion that is as predictable as breathing. The boat rises on each swell, pauses for a moment at the crest, and then slides down the backside with a soft, rushing sound, the water hissing along the planking, and then it settles into the trough to wait for the next one. This motion is so gentle, so regular, that it fades from your awareness almost immediately, becoming part of the background sensation of being at sea, something that you would notice only if it suddenly stopped. After a time you ship the oars, setting them down along the thwarts so that their blades rest above the water, the handles crossed neatly over your lap, and you let the boat drift once more. The current here is very slight, barely noticeable, a lazy circular movement that turns the boat slowly in a wide arc, so that over the course of many minutes your view of the horizon rotates through the full circle, showing you the distant shore, the empty sea, the island-shaped cloud bank, and then the shore again, each view the same, and yet subtly different as the light changes. You take this opportunity to drink again from your clay flask, the water still cool despite the climbing sun, its taste clean and faintly mineral, and you eat a single olive from your cloth bag, the flesh firm and slightly bitter, the oil leaving a smooth, rich coating on your tongue. The olive pit you toss over the side, watching it spin as it falls through the clear water, a small dark shape that descends with a wobbling motion until it disappears into the deep blue. Your fishing ground lies ahead, marked by a submerged rock that you know well. The rock is not visible from the surface at most times, but you can find it by aligning certain features on the shore, a particular gap in the line of pines, a small whitewashed hut that stands in a specific relationship to the lighthouse tower, and a low sandy hill that has a single wind-bent tree growing on its summit. These landmarks are as familiar to you as the lines on your own palm, and you check them now without any sense of urgency, letting your gaze move from the gap in the pines to the hut, from the hut to the lighthouse, from the lighthouse to the wind-bent tree, and then back again, establishing the invisible cross-bearings that tell you exactly where you are. The water above the rock is subtly different from the water around it. A slight, almost imperceptible change in the surface texture, a faint, circular upwelling that interrupts the regular pattern of the swells and creates a small, smooth patch that reflects the sky more perfectly than the surrounding sea. It is as if the water there is a little thicker, a little slower, a little more deliberate in its movement, and you have learned to read this sign as clearly as a road marker on land. You take up the oars one last time and row slowly toward the patch of smoother water, the boat responding to the slightest pressure of the blades, and as you approach, you feel the change in the boat's motion, a subtle, additional lift that comes from the water being pushed upward by the rock's submerged mass. The rock itself is perhaps 10 feet below the surface at high tide, a massive irregular block of dark grey stone that is encrusted with sea growth, its upper surface flattened and smoothed by countless centuries of wave action, its sides dropping away steeply into the deeper water that surrounds it. You cannot see the rock clearly from the surface, but you have seen it many times by diving down on calm days, and you know its shape as well as you know the shape of the boat, the wide, flat top that is pocked with small hollows where sea urchins live, the deep fissure that runs diagonally across its face, the cluster of small brown sea fans that wave slowly in the current from a ledge on its northern side. Fish are drawn to this rock, as they are drawn to all such structures that rise from the flat sea floor, and you have pulled many good hauls from the waters around it, the nets coming up heavy with mullet and bream, and sometimes, on lucky days, with a sea bass or a small grouper that had made the rock its home. You stop rowing when the boat is directly over the smoothest patch of water, the hull now riding slightly higher on the upwelling, and you let the oars rest while you prepare to cast the net. The boat turns slowly, the bow swinging around until it points back toward the shore, and then the movement stops as the current and the wind reach a temporary equilibrium, the hull settling into a position that is almost perfectly still, the only motion the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of the swells. The sun is now high enough that the deck planks have grown warm underfoot, and you can feel the heat radiating up through the soles of your sandals, a pleasant, dry warmth that contrasts with the cool, damp air that still clings to the surface of the water. The sky is a uniform pale blue from horizon to horizon, the earlier haze having burned off entirely, and the light is so clear and bright that every detail of the boat stands out with sharp-edged clarity. The grain of the pine planks, the green crust on the copper nails, the tiny crystals of salt that are formed on the gunwale where spray dried in the sun. You sit for a long moment in the stillness, the boat rising and falling, the water slapping gently against the hull, and you listen to the sounds of the open sea. There is the constant, low murmur of the wind, a sound that is less a noise and more a pressure against your ears, a soft, continuous rush that has no beginning or end. There is the lap and gurgle of water around a hull, a sound made up of many small separate notes that blend together into a single watery chord. There is the distant cry of gulls, now very far away, their voices carrying across the water as thin, plaintive notes that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And there is the sound of your own breathing, slow and steady, and the occasional faint creak of the boat's timbers as they flex with the movement of the sea, a sound so quiet that you might miss it if you were not listening. You let all these sounds wash over you, not thinking about them, not naming them, simply letting them be part of the great, quiet peace of the open water, knowing that the rock is beneath you, that the fish are there, and that the work will begin when you are ready, and not a moment before. You remain seated on the center thwart for a while longer, letting the boat ride the slow lift and fall of the swells, while the sun climbs a little higher, and the light across the water shifts from a pale, clear brilliance to something warmer, a touch more golden as the morning moves toward its middle. The sea around you is calm, the surface only lightly textured by the breeze that still blows from the northwest, and the submerged rock beneath the hull makes its presence known only through the subtle, rounded upwelling that keeps the water above it slightly smoother than the surrounding chop. Everything is ready, and nothing is urgent. The day has spread itself out before you like a length of cloth waiting to be measured and cut, and you feel no need to hurry toward the first stitch. You turn slightly on the thwart so that you are facing the stern, where the cast net lies under its piece of old sailcloth, a low dark mound that holds the shape of the folded mesh beneath. The cloth itself is heavy canvas, once a pale tan color, but now stained with darker patches where fish slime and seawater have worked their way into the fibers, and the edges have frayed into a soft fringe that moves very slightly in the breeze, the loose threads lifting and settling again with a motion that is almost like breathing. You reach over and take hold of one corner of the canvas, the fabric rough and cool under your fingers, and you pull it back slowly, uncovering the net in stages. First the outer rim appears, a fringe of small lead weights that hang in a closely packed row, each one dark grey and dull surfaced, catching the light only on their upper curves where a faint, pewter-like sheen glints for a moment, before disappearing as the boat rocks. Then the folded layers of mesh become visible, the linen cord a soft, greenish-brown color that blends so well with the sea and the shadows that it might have been woven from the very substance of the water. Finally the center of the net is revealed, the hand loop and the coiled hand line sitting in a neat, tight spiral on top of the mound, the line a paler brown than the netting and slightly fuzzy with wear. You lift the canvas clear and fold it once, twice, into a manageable square that you set aside under the stern thwart, where it will stay dry and out of the way. Then you turn your full attention to the net, and you begin the slow, methodical work of preparing it for the first cast. The preparation is not complicated, but it cannot be rushed. Every fold and every loop must be arranged just so, or the net will not open properly when it flies through the air, and a tangled cast means lost time, lost fish, and the tedious work of picking apart knots while the boat drifts off the fishing ground. You have made this preparation so many times that your hands know the sequence better than your mind does, and you let them work while your thoughts settle into the same quiet, steady rhythm. You reach out and lift a section of the leaded rim, your fingers curling under the hem and feeling the familiar, cool weight of the beads pressing into your palm. The hem is a double thickness of netting, folded over and stitched with a heavier cord that has been waxed until it is stiff and slightly tacky, and the stitches are close and even, each one passing through the mesh and around the cord in a pattern that looks like a row of tiny dark knots. You work your way along the rim, lifting and lowering, lifting and lowering, and each time you lift, the lead beads click softly against one another, a sound that is part rattle and part chime, muted and gentle, like the sound of small stones stirred by a lazy wave on a pebble beach. The beads themselves are all accounted for, each one still secure in its own small pocket, and as you move around the net, you check each pocket with a brief, light pinch between thumb and forefinger, feeling the solid, unyielding shape of the lead inside the mesh. None of the pockets have torn, none of the stitches have pulled loose, and the cord that binds the hem is still strong, its wax coating only slightly worn away in the places where the net rubs against the deck when it is hauled aboard. From the hem, the net rises in a series of concentric rings, each ring made of the same diamond-shaped mesh that grows slightly larger as it approaches the center, the openings widening from the width of a finger near the lead line to the width of a spread hand near the middle. You take hold of one of these rings and lift it, letting the netting drape from your hand in a loose flowing fall, and the mesh is so light and fine that it seems almost weightless, the cords no thicker than a sewing thread, but many times stronger. The color of the netting is not uniform. It varies from a pale gray-green, where the sun has faded it, to a deeper brownish hue in the folds that are always shaded, and this variation creates a mottled organic appearance that helps the net vanish against the seafloor. You run a length of the netting through your fingers, feeling the slight dry rasp of the linen as it slides over your skin, and you watch each knot pass under your thumb, a tiny, precise twist of cord that locks the mesh into its diamond shape and will not slip even under heavy strain. The netmaker who made this net, whoever he was, had a steady hand and a patient eye, and his work has lasted through seasons of casting and hauling, through sun and salt, and the weight of many fish. You continue to lift and examine the net in sections, working your way inward from the rim toward the center, and as you go, you use your free hand to smooth out any folds that have creased too tightly, any loops that have crossed over one another, any places where the mesh is stuck to itself from dried salt. The salt is a fine white powder that dusts the cords in the deeper folds, and when you brush it away, it rises in a tiny sparkling cloud that catches the sunlight for an instant and then vanishes into the air. The smell of the net is the smell of the sea itself, salt and sun-dried linen, and the faint, fishy undertone that never entirely washes out. And when you bring a handful of the netting close to your face, you can detect the additional, fainter smell of the wax that was used on the hem cord, a clean, slightly sweet scent like beeswax that has been warmed in the sun. The center of the net is gathered into a hand loop, a reinforced circle of heavier cord that is about the size of a bracelet, and from this loop the hand line extends, a single continuous line that will pay out through your fingers as the net sinks. You pick up the hand loop and examine it closely, turning it in your hands so that the light falls on every part of it. The cord here is 3 times thicker than the netting, made of many fine hemp strands twisted together into a dense round braid that is smooth and hard to the touch, almost like a thin wooden rod that has been made flexible. The spice that joins the loop to the hand line is a work of careful craftsmanship, the strands of the 2 cords interwoven and tapered so that the join is barely thicker than the cord itself, and you run your thumb over it, feeling the slight, even ridges of the splice, satisfied that it is still sound. The loop fits over your wrist when you cast, and you know from long experience exactly how it will feel. The brief, snug pressure as the net flies, the sudden tug when the net reaches the end of its flight, and the steady, patient pull as the net sinks through the water, drawing the handline after it. You place the hand loop aside for a moment and take up the handline itself, which is coiled in a figure-8 pattern on top of the folded net. The coil is neat but not rigid, the loops of the line lying flat and parallel, each one tucked under the one before, so that the whole coil will pay out smoothly without tangling. You lift the coil in both hands and test the line by pulling a short section taut between your fingers, feeling the slight elastic give of the hemp as it stretches and then holds firm. The line is a warm dusty brown, darker than the netting, and its surface is polished from long use to a soft, almost velvety sheen that catches the light in a continuous, subtle gleam. Where the line has rubbed against the gunwale or the deck, the fibers are slightly compressed and flattened, but they are not frayed, and there are no broken strands, no weak spots that you can find. You run the line slowly through your fingers from the coil to the end, where a small wooden toggle is attached, a toggle that will be used to secure the line to the boat when the net is down, and you check the knot that holds the toggle, a tight, compact knot that has been pulled so hard that it will never come undone, the wood of the toggle, darkened with age and smooth from handling. The preparation of the net now moves into its most important phase, the arrangement of the folds and the gathering of the lead line so that the net will fly cleanly when you cast it. You stand up in the boat, bracing one foot against the side of the hull and the other on the floorboards, and you lift the entire net from the deck in one careful two-handed motion. The net is heavy, heavier than it looks, because the lead beads along the rim add a considerable weight that drags downward, and you must support it with your arms held wide so that the mesh does not tangle. You drape the net over your left arm first, letting the leaded hem hang down in a series of shallow, even loops that fall to just above the deck, the beads swaying gently with the motion of the boat and clicking together in a soft, continuous murmur. Then you take the upper portion of the net in your right hand and begin to arrange the folds, layer upon layer, so that the net forms a series of loose, overlapping loops that will peel away from each other as the net opens in flight. This is the part of the preparation that requires the most care, and you work slowly, your eyes following your hands as they smooth each fold into place. The netting must be arranged so that the leaded rim is on the outside of the bundle and the center is on the inside, with the handline free and clear, and each fold must lie flat against the one beneath it, without any twists or crosses. You take a section of the rim and fold it back over your forearm, then another section, then another, working your way around the circle until the entire rim is gathered into a single, compact bundle that rests against your left wrist. The mesh above the rim is then folded in the opposite direction, the netting pleated back and forth like a fan, each pleat about the width of your hand and stacked neatly so that the whole net becomes a dense, orderly pile that sits securely on your left forearm. The weight of the lead beads pulls downward, keeping the folds tight and preventing the wind from catching the netting and blowing it into a tangle, and you adjust the balance with small, precise movements of your fingers, shifting a fold here, tucking a loose strand there. While you work, the boat continues its slow, rhythmic rocking, the swells passing under the hull with a steady, liquid regularity that you no longer consciously notice. The sun is warm on your back and shoulders, and the light that reflects from the water dances across the underside of your arms and the planes of your face in shifting, golden patterns. A small flying fish, startled by something below, breaks the surface, a few boat lengths away and skims across the water in a series of quick, low arcs, its wings catching the light and flashing silver before it disappears again with a soft, spreading splash. You glance up at the movement, note it without any particular interest, and then return your attention to the net, your hands never pausing in their slow, careful work. With the net now gathered and arranged on your left arm, you take the hand line in your right hand and begin to coil it in a separate loose loop that you will hold during the cast. The hand line must be coiled in such a way that it can pay out freely, without any snags or knots, and you form the coil by winding the line around your right hand in a series of wide, easy loops, each one crossing the back of your hand and then your palm, the line settling into place with a soft, dry whisper. You leave a generous length of line free between the coil and the net's hand loop, a length that you measure by eye and adjust with a small pull, and then you secure the coil by tucking the last loop under your thumb, holding it in place with a light, steady pressure. The wooden toggle at the end of the line dangles from the bottom of the coil, swinging slightly with the boat's motion, and you check that it is free and clear, ready to be tied off to the gunwale when the net is in the water. You stand for a moment in the center of the boat, the net gathered on your left arm, the hand line coiled in your right, and you test the setup by making a small experimental motion, a slight lift and twist of your left arm that mimics the beginning of the cast. The net shifts but holds its shape, the folds staying in place, the lid beads clinking softly but not tangling, and you are satisfied. The preparation is complete, the net is ready, and there is nothing left to do but cast it out over the side and let it fall through the clear, deep water to the sandy floor below. But you do not cast yet. Instead, you stand in the gently rocking boat, feeling the weight of the net on your arm and the warmth of the sun on your skin, and you let the quiet of the open sea settle around you once more, holding the moment still and whole before the work begins. You stand in the center of the boat, with the net gathered on your left arm and the hand line coiled in your right, and the moment has arrived when the preparation ends and the work itself begins. The boat rides the slow swells with a gentle, predictable motion, lifting at the bow and then settling back, lifting and settling, and you have braced your feet in the way that you always do, the left foot planted against the side of the hull where a small, worn depression in the planking shows the spot your foot has pressed 1,000 times before, the right foot flat on the floorboards with the toes curled slightly for balance. Your body knows this stance so well that you do not have to think about it, just as you do not have to think about the way your knees bend very slightly to absorb the boat's movement, or the way your shoulders square themselves to the direction of the cast. All of this happens without any conscious decision, the result of so many repetitions that the action has become part of your physical memory, stored in your muscles and bones rather than in your thoughts. You turn your head and look out over the water, choosing the exact spot where the net will land. The spot is not random. It is the place where the surface shows that faint, subtle smoothing that indicates the rock below, the place where the water seems a little thicker and a little slower, and you fix your eyes on a point just beyond the center of that smooth patch, allowing for the slight drift of the boat and the slight movement of the current. The light on the water is bright and clear, the sun now well up in the sky, and the reflection of the pale blue dome above shatters into 1,000,000 tiny dancing points of brilliance that shift and reform with every ripple. You narrow your eyes against the glare a habit formed over years of working on open water, and you pick out the spot and hold it in your gaze. The cast itself begins not with the arm but with the body, a slow, coiling turn that starts in your hips and travels up through your torso to your shoulders. You twist to the right, drawing the net back across your body, and as you turn, the weight of the lead beads pulls the net into a smooth, compact bundle that hangs from your left hand, the hand line still coiled and secure in your right. The turn continues until you feel a gentle stretch across the muscles of your back, a sensation that is not pain, but simply the body reaching the limit of its comfortable rotation. And you pause there for a single, suspended moment, the net held high and back, the lead beads swaying in a short, pendulous arc that makes their soft, clicking music. Then you uncoil, reversing the turn with a smooth, accelerating motion that flows from your hips through your shoulders and into your left arm. And at the precise moment when your body faces forward again, you release the net. The release is not a throw in the way that a man throws a stone. It is more like a sweeping outward gesture, the arm swinging in a wide horizontal arc, the hand opening to let the gathered folds fly free. The net leaves your hand and travels through the air, and for a brief, suspended interval, it is a dark, circular shape against the pale blue of the sky, its form expanding as the folds peel away from each other in the sequence that you arranged so carefully. The leaded rim spreads outward, pulling the mesh with it, and the net opens into a perfect widening circle, the diamond-shaped mesh catching the light and glinting for an instant, like a web spun from thin brown-grey silk. The hand line pays out from the coil in your right hand with a soft, hissing sound, the hemp running smoothly over your palm and through your fingers, and you feel the gentle, continuous tug as each loop of the coil straightens and disappears over the side. The net reaches its full extension and seems to hang in the air for a single, weightless moment, a perfect disk of mesh suspended between the sky and the sea, its outer rim weighted by the lead beads that now hang straight down, ready to enter the water first. Then gravity takes hold, and the net descends, the rim touching the surface with a sound that is not a single splash, but a spreading, circular hiss as the lead beads strike the water one after another in rapid succession, a soft, liquid percussion that travels around the circumference of the net and then fades into the general wash of the sea. The net settles onto the surface, its mesh floating for a moment on the surface tension before the weight of the lead beads begins to pull it under, and you watch the circle shrink as the rim sinks, the netting drawing inward and downward, the hand line still paying out steadily through your fingers. Now the net is under water, and you can see it descending through the clear blue-green depths, its shape becoming less distinct as it goes deeper, the mesh softening into a ghostly drifting cone that tapers down toward the center where the hand line attaches. The lead beads pull the rim steadily toward the bottom, and the netting billows slightly as it sinks, the water flowing through the diamond-shaped openings and making the mesh pulse with a slow, rhythmic, almost lifelike motion. The hand line continues to run through your hand, the hemp cool and wet now from the water it has passed through, and you keep a light, steady grip on the line, not clamping down, but simply letting it slide, feeling each small vibration that travels up from the sinking net. These vibrations are tiny, subtle things, barely perceptible, but you have learned to read them over the years. A slight, rapid flutter might mean the net is passing through a school of very small fish, while a single, sharper tug might mean a larger fish has brushed against the mesh and the steady, smooth pull is simply the weight of the lead beads drawing the net down through the water column. The boat drifts slowly while the net sinks, the swells pushing it a few feet to the south and then a few feet back, and you adjust your stance without thinking, shifting your weight to keep your balance as the deck rises and falls. The sun is warm on the back of your neck and on your bare arms, and a few beads of sweat have formed along your hairline, though the breeze that blows across the water keeps them from growing into anything more, the moving air cool and dry and faintly salty against your skin. You watch the hand line as it pays out, the coil in your right hand growing smaller as the loops unwind, and you count the passage of time not by any clock, but by the feel of the line, the way the tension changes as the net approaches the bottom. When the net finally reaches the sandy floor around the submerged rock, you feel the change immediately. The steady, downward pull of the lead beads ceases, replaced by a slack, floating sensation as the line goes still in your hand. The net is now resting on the bottom, its weighted rim spread in a wide circle on the sand, the mesh rising up from the rim in a loose, dome-like shape that encloses whatever fish were swimming above the rock when the net fell. You let the last few inches of line slip through your fingers, and then you stop the coil, holding the line steady, and you tie the wooden toggle at the end to a small iron ring set into the gunwale for this purpose. The knot, a simple half hitch that will hold the line secure but can be released with a single pull when the time comes to haul the net back up. With the net down and the line secured, there is nothing to do but wait. Waiting is as much a part of the work as the casting and the hauling, and you have learned to wait in the same way that you have learned to row, with a patient, unhurried stillness that asks nothing of the passing moments. You settle back onto the center thwart, the wood warm from the sun, and you let your hands rest loosely in your lap, the palms turned upward and the fingers slightly curled. The hand line runs from the gunwale ring to the water, a single taut strand that cuts into the surface at a shallow angle, and you watch it with a relaxed, unfocused attention, your gaze resting on the point where the hemp enters the sea, and then drifting away again, moving out across the water to the distant shore or up to the pale dome of the sky. The sounds of the open sea return to fill the quiet that your work has left behind. There is the constant gentle hiss of the breeze across the surface, a sound that rises and falls in very slight, almost imperceptible waves, like the breathing of some vast invisible creature. There is the slap of the small waves against the hull, a rhythmic, liquid beat that sometimes doubles and sometimes pauses, never exactly the same from one minute to the next, but always familiar, always part of the background. There is the creak of the boat's timbers as they flex with the motion of the swells, a sound so low and so regular that it might be the boat's own heartbeat. The pine planks and the oak gunwale and the ash oars all working together in their quiet wooden chorus. And there is the distant carrying cry of the gulls, now very far away, their voices thin and plaintive and strangely musical, like the notes of a flute played by someone who does not quite know the tune. You sit in the midst of all these sounds, and you do not listen to them so much as you let them pass through you, the way the sunlight passes through the clear water, or the way the breeze passes through the loose weave of your tunic. Your thoughts, if they can be called thoughts, are slow and quiet, not the sharp, busy chatter of the city, but a drifting, dreamlike stream of simple impressions, the color of the water, the shape of a cloud, the feel of the wood under your hands, the faint, persistent scent of salt and fish, and warm pine resin. You are not thinking about the net or the fish or the work that remains to be done. You are simply present, sitting in the boat on the open sea, and that presence is enough. After a time you reach for the clay flask and drink again. The water still cool despite the warmth of the day, and you eat a piece of the dark bread, breaking it with your fingers and chewing it slowly. The texture dense and slightly chewy, the taste faintly sour from the leavening. You watch the hand line as you eat, noting the way it quivers, very slightly, with the movement of the sea, the strand vibrating like a plucked string that has been damped almost to silence. A small transparent creature, some kind of jellyfish, drifts past the boat just below the surface, its body a faint, milky globe that pulses slowly as it moves, its trailing tentacles so fine and so pale that they are nearly invisible in the bright water. You watch it pass, and then it is gone, sinking away into the deeper blue, and you return your attention to the line. The waiting continues, and the sun climbs a little higher, and the shadows on the deck shorten until they are almost nothing, the light falling straight down from the zenith, so that every surface is illuminated evenly, without any dark corners or hidden places. The heat is greater now, but the breeze keeps it from becoming uncomfortable, and you are used to the sun, your skin tanned to a deep brown gold that has been baked in over many years, the color of old wood or cured leather. You shift your position slightly on the thwart, stretching your legs out and then drawing them back, and you roll your shoulders once, twice, to ease the slight stiffness that comes from sitting still. The handline remains steady, the toggle secure in its ring, the net resting on the bottom below. You do not know exactly what is happening down there in the dim blue-green light, on the sandy floor around the rock with its sea fans and its urchins and its small darting fish, but you can imagine it clearly because you have seen it many times. The net spread in a wide circular tent over the bottom, the lead beads resting lightly on the sand, the mesh rising up like a thin, nearly invisible wall, and inside that wall the fish swimming in slow, confused circles, unaware that the way upwards, swimming in slow, confused circles. The image is clear in your mind, but you do not dwell on it, and you do not feel any impatience to know what the net has caught. The haul will come when it comes, and the waiting is its own kind of work, as necessary and as valuable as any other part of the day. You let your gaze drift across the water, out toward the horizon where the sea meets the sky, in a soft, hazy line that seems to shimmer and move as you watch it. Far off, a small dark shape that might be a distant boat or might be a floating log moves slowly across the field of your vision, and you watch it without any particular curiosity, simply noting its presence and its slow, steady progress. The world is very large and very quiet, and you are a small part of it. A single figure in a small wooden boat on a vast empty sea, and there is no need for anything more than this, no need for speed or noise or striving. You let your breathing slow and deepen, matching the rhythm of the swells, and you wait, and the waiting is easy. The wait ends not because any signal tells you it is time, but because a certain feeling settles into your body. A quiet, internal sense that the net has rested on the bottom long enough for the fish to have calmed and gathered within its circle, and that the next part of the work can now begin. You rise from the thwart slowly, your legs unfolding beneath you with the same unhurried ease that governs everything on the boat, and you step to the side where the hand line runs from the iron ring on the gunwale down into the water. The line is still taut, but not strained. The hemp dark with moisture where it enters the sea, and it vibrates with a faint, continuous tremor that is simply the movement of the water rather than any sign of fish. You reach down and untie the wooden toggle from the ring, working the half hitch loose with a single practiced pull, and you take the line in your right hand, feeling the familiar, wet roughness of the hemp against your palm and the slight, living tension that connects you to the net far below. The hauling begins. You do not pull with a sudden, forceful jerk, but that would startle the fish and might tear the net against any sharp edge on the rock, but instead you begin a steady, rhythmic retrieval, drawing the line in hand over hand with a slow, even pressure that keeps the net moving upward through the water at a constant, unhurried speed. Each pull is the same length, the span from your outstretched hand to your chest, and you close your fingers around the wet line and draw it toward you. Then reach forward with your left hand to grasp the line farther out, while your right hand releases and reaches again, a continuous alternating motion that has the same regular mechanical quality as the oar stroke or the turning of a wheel. The line comes in dripping, the water running down the hemp in small clear rivulets that fall back into the sea with a soft, scattered patter, and as it comes you coil it on the deck at your feet in a loose, flat spiral that will be ready for the next cast. The weight of the net increases as it rises from the bottom, the lead beads dragging against the resistance of the water, and you feel the pull through the line as a steady, growing pressure that works the muscles of your arms and shoulders and back. This is the heaviest part of the work, the part that requires the most physical effort, but the effort is spread evenly across many small pulls rather than concentrated in a single strain, and you have done it so many times that your body accepts it without complaint, the muscles warming and loosening, the breath coming a little deeper and a little slower. The boat rocks with the rhythm of your hauling, the motion of your body transferring to the hull and making it sway slightly from side to side, and the sound of the water dripping from the line mingles with the slap of the small waves and the creak of the timbers to create a working music that fills the quiet air. Through the clear water you can now see the net rising, a pale, ghostly shape that grows larger and more distinct as it approaches the surface. At first it is only a faint circular shadow far below, a darkness that might be mistaken for a patch of weed or a cloud passing over the seafloor. But as it comes higher, the mesh becomes visible, the diamond-shaped openings catching the light and glinting like a net of tiny silver threads. The fish within the net become visible too, appearing first as quick, flashing movements, the silver of their sides catching the sun in sudden brilliant bursts that flash and flash again as they circle within the confined space. There are more of them than you had expected, a good sign, and you continue hauling with the same steady, patient rhythm, not hurrying even now that the catch is in sight, because hurrying at the end can cause the net to twist or the fish to spill over the rim. The net breaks the surface with a soft, rushing sound, the water pouring off the mesh in 1,000 small, sparkling streams that fall back into the sea and leave the linen cord dark and heavy and glistening. The leaded rim appears first, a circle of dark grey beads that rides just above the waves, and then the body of the net rises, still submerged but now visible, a great dripping bag of mesh that bulges with the weight of the water and the movement of the fish inside. You continue hauling, drawing the net toward the boat, and as it comes closer, you can see the individual fish through the mesh, their bodies pressed together in a dense, silvery mass, their tails flicking and their fins spreading and folding as they swim in tight, agitated circles within their confinement. The moment comes to bring the net aboard, and you adjust your stance, planting your feet more firmly and bracing your knees against the side of the hull. With a final, coordinated pull, you lift the net over the gunwale, using your whole body to manage the weight, and you lay it across the floorboards in a wet, shining heap that immediately begins to drain, the water running out through the mesh and across the deck and back into the sea through the small gaps between the planks. The fish inside the net are now fully revealed, a glittering, squirming mass of silver and grey and pale blue, and you kneel beside the catch, the wet wood of the floorboards pressing against your shins through the fabric of your tunic. The sorting begins, and it is the most careful, the most patient work of all. You open the folds of the net slowly, peeling back one layer of mesh and then another, and as you uncover the fish, you begin to separate them by kind and by size, lifting each one from the net with a gentle but firm grip and placing it into the appropriate basket. The fish are cool and wet to the touch, their scales smooth and slippery, and they wriggle and flex in your hand. Some of them still strong and lively, others already still from their time in the net. You handle each one with the same unhurried, methodical care, your fingers finding the right grip behind the gills or around the body, just below the dorsal fin, a grip that holds the fish securely without damaging it. The first fish you lift is a small mullet, its body a perfect streamlined oval of silver grey that is darker along the back and paler along the belly, its scales large and regular and overlapping like the tiles on a roof. The mullet's mouth is small and slightly downturned, and its eyes are large and dark and rimmed with a thin circle of gold, and it gapes and flexes in your hand as you lift it, the gill covers opening and closing, the tail giving a few weak slapping beats against your wrist. You place it gently into the wide, shallow basket, where it lies on its side among a few strands of wet netting, its body gleaming in the sunlight, and then you reach for the next. The next fish is another mullet, slightly larger than the first, and then there is a small sea bream, its body deeper and more compressed, its sides marked with faint vertical stripes of grey and pink that catch the light and shimmer with an iridescent pearly sheen. The bream has a steeper forehead than the mullet and a smaller mouth, and its dorsal fin is armed with a row of sharp, slender spines that you avoid by gripping the fish carefully behind the head, your fingers finding the smooth, unguarded spot just behind the gill covers. You lift the bream and place it in the basket with the mullet, and the two fish lie side by side, their colors contrasting, the silver grey of the mullet and the striped pinkish sheen of the bream, both glistening with the wetness of the sea. You continue through the catch, fish by fish, your hands working with the same steady, rhythmic motion that they used for the hauling, and the pile of netting on the deck slowly shrinks as you extract each animal and sort it into its proper place. There are more mullet than anything else, a dozen or more, their sizes ranging from the length of your hand to nearly the length of your forearm, and they fill the shallow basket in a layer of overlapping silver bodies. There are several bream of various sizes, their vertical stripes varying from nearly invisible on the smaller ones to bold and distinct on the larger, and these go into a separate basket, a deeper one with higher sides. There is a single, larger fish that you identify as a sea bass, its body longer and more muscular than the mullet, its mouth large and slightly underslung, its back a dark greenish-grey that fades to silver on the flanks and white on the belly. The base is still very much alive, and it struggles strongly when you lift it, its body flexing with a sudden, powerful surge that almost slips from your grip before you secure it with both hands and lower it into its own basket, where it continues to thrash for a moment before settling into a still, watchful alertness. There are other things in the net besides fish. A small crab, no larger than a walnut, has become tangled in the mesh, its legs waving slowly in the air, its claws opening and closing with a faint clicking sound. You pick it out carefully, pinching the mesh around it to free its legs one at a time, and when it is loose, you drop it over the side, watching it sink through the clear water with its legs spread wide, drifting down toward the bottom like a small brown leaf. There is a piece of seagrass, a long green ribbon that has wrapped itself around several of the lead beads, and you unwind it patiently and let it fall into the sea, where it floats on the surface for a moment before the current carries it away. There are a few small shells, empty and clean, their occupants long gone, and these you toss over the side as well, watching them spin and flash as they descend. The sorting continues until the net is empty and all the fish are in their baskets, the catch laid out before you in a glistening, orderly arrangement that speaks of the morning's work well done. The fish are beautiful in their stillness, their bodies sleek and perfect, their colors vivid in the bright sunlight, and you take a moment to look at them, not with pride or satisfaction, but with a quiet, simple acknowledgement of what the sea has given. You count them without counting, your eye moving over the baskets and registering the numbers in a way that is more feeling than arithmetic, and you know that it is a good catch, enough to make the day worthwhile, enough to bring to the fishmonger in exchange for the coins that will buy tomorrow's bread and olives and cheese. With the sorting finished, you turn your attention to the net itself. It lies in a wet, crumpled heap on the floorboards, the mesh tangled in places from the struggle of the fish, the lead beads scattered across the deck where they fell when you opened the folds. You begin the work of straightening it, lifting the rim and shaking it gently to let the mesh hang free, your hands moving slowly along the lead line to gather the beads into their orderly fringe. The net is heavy with water, and the linen cord is dark and slick, but it untangles easily enough, the knot slipping free under your patient fingers, the mesh opening into its proper diamond pattern as you work your way around the circle. You drape the net over the gunwale in loose, looping folds so that it can begin to dry in the sun and the breeze, and the water drips from it in a steady, musical rhythm, each drop striking the surface of the sea with a tiny liquid note that joins the larger music of the boat and the water and the wind. You stand up and stretch, your back arching slightly, your arms reaching up toward the pale, warm sky, and you feel the pleasant, tired looseness in your muscles that comes after the hauling and the sorting. The sun is now past its zenith, beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon, though there are still many hours of daylight left, and the quality of the light has shifted again, the harsh, bright clarity of noon giving way to a softer, more golden tone that makes the water look richer and deeper, the blue-green now touched with hints of amber and gold. The breeze has freshened slightly, and it moves across your damp hands and your damp tunic with a cool, drying touch that feels clean and good. You take up the clay flask and drink again, the water still cool, and you eat another olive, the taste sharp and bright on your tongue, and you look out across the water to the distant shore and the pale hazy line of the horizon, and you feel the quiet, steady pulse of the day continuing around you, unhurried and complete. The morning continues in a way that blurs the boundaries between one action and the next, the work settling into a pattern so steady and so familiar that it becomes less a series of separate tasks and more a single, unbroken flow of movement through the daylight hours. You stand in the boat with the net draped over the gunwale, the mesh drying in the sun and the breeze, and after a time you gather it back into your arms and begin the preparation for the second cast, the motions repeating exactly as they did before. The lifting of the rim, the checking of the lead beads with their soft clicking music, the smoothing of the folds, the coiling of the handline, the careful arrangement of the net across your left forearm so that it will fly cleanly when you release it. Your body knows the sequence so deeply that your mind drifts free, wandering across the surface of the water or rising into the pale, warm sky, while your hands do their work without any need for guidance. The second cast is like the first, the net arcing out over the water and opening into a perfect, spreading circle, the lead beads striking the surface with that same soft circular hiss, the handline paying out through your fingers in a smooth, continuous whisper. The net sinks through the clear blue-green water, the mesh billowing and pulsing, and you tie off the line and settle onto the thwart to wait, the boat rocking gently under you, the sun warm on your shoulders, the sounds of the sea filling the quiet. The weight is the same length or nearly the same, and when the feeling comes that it is time to haul, you rise and take up the line and begin the steady, hand-over-hand retrieval, the water dripping, the mesh rising from the depths like a pale ghost, the fish flashing silver within the confined space. The catch is similar, a handful of mullet, 2 bream, and a small spiny fish that you do not recognize and release back over the side, watching it dart away into the deeper blue with a flick of its tail that leaves a tiny swirling eddy in its wake. After the second haul, you pause to drink water from the clay flask and to eat a few olives, their flesh firm and their taste sharp and clean. You sit on the thwart with your legs stretched out and your back resting against the gunwale, and you let your gaze travel across the water to the distant shore, where the lighthouse still gleams as a tiny white needle against the haze, and the town of Ostia is a low brown-grey smudge that seems to shimmer slightly in the heat rising from the land. The umbrella pines on the dunes are a dark, motionless band, and the marsh grass is a stripe of pale gold that catches the light and holds it, glowing softly. The world is so still and so quiet that it might be a painting rather than a living place. The only movement, the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of the swells and the occasional distant flight of a gull, crossing the sky on wings that barely seem to beat. You cast a third time, and then a fourth, the pattern establishing itself so firmly that each cycle flows into the next without any conscious decision on your part. The preparation, the cast, the weight, the haul, the sorting of the catch into the baskets, the straightening of the net, the brief rest, and then the preparation again. The sun climbs a little higher and then begins its slow descent, the light shifting from the pale, bright gold of late morning to the deeper, richer amber of the afternoon, and the shadows on the deck lengthen, stretching out from the thwarts and the baskets and your own seated form like dark, stretching fingers that move so slowly you cannot see them change, only notice after a while that they have moved. The heat intensifies, the air growing warmer and heavier, and the breeze that had been so steady now falters at times, dropping to a barely perceptible breath that leaves the surface of the water glassy and still, the only ripples those made by the boat's own rocking and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface far off. During one of the waits, a small bird lands on the gunwale near your hand, a tiny, brownish creature with a pale breast and a quick, bright eye that watches you without any sign of fear. It stays for perhaps a minute, its head turning in short, jerky movements, its feet gripping the smooth wood with tiny dark claws, and then it flies away as suddenly as it came, its wings making a soft, whirring sound that fades quickly into the larger quiet. You watch it go, following its flight until it becomes a small dark dot that vanishes against the pale blue of the sky, and then you return your attention to the handline, which has not moved, which remains as steady and as silent as before. The catch varies slightly from haul to haul, the sea giving up its fish in an unpredictable but never dramatic rhythm, some casts bringing up 5 or 6 good mullet, others only 2 or 3, and once the net comes up nearly empty, holding only a single small bream and a handful of seaweed that has wrapped itself around the lead line. You clear the seaweed away patiently, pulling the long, green ribbons from the mesh and dropping them over the side, and you cast again in the same spot, knowing that the fish move in ways you cannot see, that an empty net is not a failure, but simply part of the rhythm. A pause in the larger, hidden music of the sea. The baskets slowly fill, the layers of silver fish rising higher, their scales drying in the sun and taking on a dull, pearly sheen that is different from the bright, wet gleam they had when first brought aboard. You cover them with a piece of damp cloth to keep them cool, the cloth darkening as it absorbs the moisture from the fish, and you continue the work. In the early afternoon, the heat becomes more noticeable, the sun now pressing down with a heavy, insistent weight that makes the deck planks almost too warm to touch, and draws the smell of pine resin more strongly from the wood. You take off your sandals and set them aside, feeling the warm, smooth wood under the soles of your bare feet, and you splash a little seawater onto your face and arms, the water cool and sharp and quickly evaporating, leaving behind a faint, prickling layer of salt that tightens your skin. The flask is nearly empty now, and you drink the last of the water slowly, knowing that there is more waiting back on shore, but that the day's work is not yet done, that you will stay out here until the baskets are full or the light begins to fail, whichever comes first. A 5th cast and then a 6th, the net flying out over the water with the same smooth, practiced motion, the same soft, circular hiss as it lands, the same patient sinking through the clear depths. The waiting becomes longer as the afternoon wears on, not because the fish are fewer, but because you are in no hurry, because the warmth and the rocking of the boat and the quiet of the sea have settled into your bones, making every movement slower and more deliberate, as if you are moving through water yourself. You sit on the thwart with your eyes half closed, the light filtering through your lashes in a warm golden blur, and you listen to the sounds of the sea, the gentle slap of the waves, the creak of the timbers, the distant, mewing cry of the gulls, all of it blending into a single, continuous, soothing hum that seems to be the voice of the world itself. During the 7th haul, you bring up something unexpected, a small octopus that has wrapped its arms around the mesh and clings tightly, its body a mottled brownish-grey that shifts and changes as you watch, the skin rippling with patterns of darker and lighter pigment that flow across its surface like clouds across a windy sky. You pause with the net half open, looking at the creature, and it looks back at you with one large golden eye that has a strange, almost knowing quality, the pupil a horizontal slit that widens and narrows as it watches. Its arms are long and slender and lined with 2 rows of small white suckers, and they curl and uncurl slowly, exploring the mesh, testing its strength. You work carefully to free it, lifting the netting away from its body one section at a time, and the octopus resists at first, holding tight, but then it releases suddenly and flows over the side of the boat in a single liquid movement, its body elongating and then contracting as it jets away, leaving behind a small dark cloud of ink that hangs in the water like smoke, and then slowly disperses, fading into the blue-green depths, until nothing remains. You watch the ink cloud dissolve, the last faint tendrils drifting away on the current, and then you return to the sorting, your hands moving among the wet mesh and the cool silver fish with the same patient, untroubled rhythm. The baskets are growing heavy now, the layers of fish packed closely together, and you estimate the 1 or 2 more good hauls will fill them completely. You cast again, the 8th cast, or perhaps the 9th. You have lost count and do not care to retrieve the number, and the net flies out over the water and settles with its familiar, spreading splash. The wait is long and quiet, the boat drifting slowly on the current, the sun now noticeably lower in the sky, its light a deep, rich gold that makes the water glow as if lit from within. The shadows are longer, the shapes of the baskets and the oars and your own body stretching out across the deck in dark, distorted silhouettes, and the air has begun to cool, the oppressive heat of early afternoon giving way to a gentler, softer warmth that carries the first hint of evening. You sit and watch the handline, your thoughts slow and diffuse, and you feel the day settling around you like a cloak, comfortable and familiar. When you haul this time, the net is heavier than before, the mesh bulging with a larger catch, and you pull with a little more effort, the muscles of your arms and back working steadily. The line coming in hand over hand, the water streaming from the hemp in a steady silver flow. The fish inside are many, a dense, squirming mass of silver and grey and flashes of brighter colour, and when you bring the net over the side and open it on the deck, you see that it holds a good number of mullet, several bream and another sea bass, this one larger than the first, its body a powerful streamlined shape of greenish-grey and silver, its mouth gaping, its gill covers working. You sort the catch carefully, placing each fish into its basket, and the baskets are now nearly full, the top layer of fish glistening in the golden light, their scales catching the sun in a final, brilliant display before the day begins to dim. You stand for a moment after the sorting, stretching your back and your arms, feeling the pleasant deep tiredness that comes from a full day of work on the water, a tiredness that is not exhaustion, but simply the body's acknowledgement of what it has done. You look out across the sea, which has changed its colour again, the deep blue-green now touched with shades of lavender and rose where the setting sun catches the surface, the light breaking into long, shimmering paths that stretch across the water toward the distant shore. The lighthouse is a dark silhouette now, no longer gleaming white, but standing black against the brightening colours of the sky, and the town is a dark, low mass that has begun to show tiny points of light, the first lamps being lit in the windows of the buildings along the waterfront. The air is cooler, and the breeze has freshened once more, blowing steadily from the northwest and carrying the smell of the sea, mixed now with the faint, smoky scent of evening fires from the shore. You decide that the next haul will be the last, that the baskets are full enough, and the day has given what it has to give. You gather the net one more time. The movement's slower now. Your hands tired but still sure, and you cast it out over the water with the same smooth, sweeping motion that you used the first time. The net opening and falling and sinking through the golden glowing water. The weight is shorter this time, the net resting on the bottom for only a brief interval before you begin the final haul, pulling it up through the deepening blue, the mesh rising, the fish appearing as pale, flickering shapes, and when you bring it aboard there are only a few fish, 3 mullet and a small bream, as if the sea knows that the work is ending and offers only a small, final gift. You sort them into the baskets with the others, and then you straighten the net for the last time, draping it over the gunwale to let the water drain away, the mesh dark and heavy and glistening in the fading light. You stand at the side of the boat, your hands resting on the gunwale, and you look out across the water for a long, quiet moment, feeling the day settle around you, complete and whole. The sky is now a deep, rich tapestry of colors, orange and gold and pink, and a pale, clear green near the horizon. And the first stars are beginning to appear in the darker blue of the east, tiny, faint points of light that flicker and then hold steady. The sea has calmed, the swells now long and slow and gentle, and the boat rides them with a peaceful, rocking motion that is like the breathing of the world. You take a deep breath of the cool, salt air, and then you turn to the oars, ready to begin the slow row back to the harbor, knowing that the work is done, that the catch is good, and that the rhythm of the day has been kept. The decision to return to the harbor settles over you not as a sudden thought, but as a quiet, gradual recognition that the day's work has reached its natural end. The basket's full, the sun low, your body carrying that pleasant, heavy tiredness that comes from hours of casting and hauling on the open water. You stand for a moment longer at the gunwale, your hands resting on the smooth, warm wood, and you look out across the sea, one final time before turning away. The water has taken on the deeper, richer colors of late afternoon, the blue-green now infused with shades of amber and copper where the descending sun catches the surface, and the swells have lengthened into slow, gentle rollers that lift the boat with a peaceful, rocking motion. Far off, near the horizon, a small flock of birds is flying low over the water, their wings beating in a steady, unhurried rhythm, and they move across the golden light like a single dark shape that shifts and reforms as they go, heading toward some distant, unseen shore. You turn from the view and begin the final tasks that must be done before the boat can head home, the small closing rituals that complete the work and make everything ready for the return. The net still drapes over the gunwale where you left it, the mesh now mostly dry. The linen cord a soft, greenish brown that is lighter than when wet. The lead beads hanging in a neat, orderly fringe that sways gently with the boat's motion. You lift the net from the gunwale carefully, gathering the folds in your arms the way you might gather a length of heavy cloth, and you lay it out across the floorboards one last time, smoothing the mesh flat with your palms, working out the few tangles that are formed during the drying. The net rustles softly as you handle it, a dry, papery sound that is very different from the wet, heavy slapping of the morning, and the smell of it is the smell of sun-dried linen and salt, and the faint, persistent trace of fish that will never entirely wash away. You fold the net methodically, following the same pattern you have always followed, bringing the leaded rim inward in a series of even, overlapping loops, then folding the body of the mesh over itself in layers that stack neatly one upon the other, the whole forming a compact, orderly bundle that will be easy to spread out again tomorrow. The hand line is coiled separately, wound in a tight figure eight that you tuck into the top of the bundle, and then you take the piece of old sailcloth and cover everything, pulling the canvas snug and smoothing it flat, tucking the frayed edges under the bundle so that the wind cannot catch them. The net is now secure, protected from the damp night air and the morning dew, and you set it in its usual place under the stern thwart, where it will ride safely during the row back to the harbour. Next you turn to the baskets, which sit in a row along the side of the boat, their contents gleaming dully in the golden light. The fish have settled into stillness, their bodies arranged in neat, overlapping layers, their scales now dry and slightly dulled, the bright wet gleam of the morning replaced by a softer pearly sheen that still catches the light in subtle, shifting patterns. You lift each basket carefully, testing its weight, and you rearrange them so that they sit securely on the floorboards, the heaviest ones in the center where they will not shift during the row, the lighter ones tucked against the thwarts. The damp cloth that covers the top layer of fish you adjust, pulling it straight and tucking the edges down around the sides of the baskets, and you sprinkle a little sea water over the cloth from the baler to keep it moist, the water darkening the fabric in small spreading patches. The baler itself you empty over the side, tipping it slowly so that the water runs out in a thin silvery stream that catches the light and sparkles as it falls, and then you set it back in its corner under the stern thwart, where it will stay until it is needed again. The oars, which have been resting along the thwarts, you check one more time, running your hand along the shafts to feel for any new cracks or splinters, finding none, and you position them so that they will be easy to take up when you are ready to row. The mooring line you uncoil from under the stern thwart and lay ready near the bow, its loops loose and clear, the wooden toggle at its end ready to be tied to the iron ring on the dock when you arrive. Everything is in order, everything is in its place, and the boat is tidy and prepared, the deck swept clean by the wind and the water, the gear stowed, the catch secure. You take up the oars and fit them into the notches on the gunwales, the leather collars settling into the wood with a soft, familiar creak, and you seat yourself on the center thwart facing the stern so that you can row forward toward the shore. The oar handles are warm from the sun, the wood smooth and dry under your palms, and you take a moment to settle yourself, adjusting your grip, finding the balance point where the oars feel almost weightless in your hands. The boat has drifted a little during the final preparations, and you check your position by glancing over your shoulder at the shore, noting the landmarks that tell you where you are. The lighthouse now visible as a dark, slender tower against the brightening colors of the western sky, the gap in the pines that marks the river mouth, the low, sandy hill with its single wind-bent tree. You align these features in your mind, establishing the heading that will take you back to the harbor entrance, and then you lean into the first stroke. The oars dip into the water with a clean, deep sound, the blade slicing through the surface and then pulling against the resistance of the sea, and the boat answers by sliding forward, the hull moving smoothly across the gentle swells. The rhythm of the rowing is slower now than it was in the morning, your body tired but not exhausted, the muscles of your arms and back and shoulders working with a loose, easy cadence that matches the slow, rolling motion of the sea. Each stroke is a complete cycle, the reach forward, the dip of the blades, the pull through the water with the resistance steady and even. The slight pause at the finish, the feathering turn of the wrists, the recovery with the blades skimming just above the surface, and then the reach again. The sound of the oarlocks is a soft, regular creak that rises and falls with each stroke, and the water drips from the blades in a steady, musical pattern, the droplets catching the golden light and flashing like tiny, liquid jewels before they fall back into the sea. The shore grows slowly larger as you row, the details that were invisible at a distance now beginning to emerge from the haze, the white line of the beach where the dunes meet the water, the dark spreading crowns of the umbrella pines, the red-brown tiles of the rooftops in the town, the grey-white blocks of the warehouses along the waterfront. The lighthouse tower becomes more distinct, its square, tapering form now clearly visible, the dark cage at its summit standing out against the pale sky, and you can see the faint dark line of the mole extending from the tower into the sea. The stones of its construction now individually visible, the seaweed at its base a dark shifting ribbon. The river mouth opens before you, the brownish water of the Tiber spreading out in a wide, fan-shaped plume that pushes against the blue-green of the sea, and the line of turbulence where the two waters meet is still visible, a narrow, choppy zone that sparkles and hisses as the currents collide. The tide is with you now, a gentle but insistent push that helps the boat along, adding its own quiet force to each stroke of the oars. You can feel it as a subtle additional glide, a lengthening of each pull, a sense that the boat is eager to return to the harbour and needs only a little guidance from you to find its way. The rowing becomes easier, the oars seeming lighter in your hands, the distance falling away with each steady, rhythmic cycle, and you let the tide do its work, your strokes becoming less about propulsion and more about keeping the boat pointed straight, keeping the bow aimed at the center of the harbor entrance where the water runs deepest and the current is most even. As you approach the harbor, you begin to pass other boats, most of them heading in the same direction, returning to port after their own days on the water. Some are small fishing craft like yours, their occupants rowing with the same slow, tired rhythm, their nets draped over their gunwales or folded in their sterns, their baskets of fish visible as dark, rounded shapes. Others are larger vessels, coastal traders with single masts and furled sails, their decks crowded with cargo, their crews moving slowly about the business of making ready for the night. One such trader passes close by you, its hull high and dark, its bow pushing aside a white curling wave that spreads out in a V-shaped wake, and you can smell the cargo it carries, a rich, sweet scent of wine and olive oil that drifts across the water and mingles with the salt and the fish and the distant smoke. The helmsman at the stern raises a hand in greeting, a brief, simple gesture, and you lift your own hand from the oar in reply, the two of you sharing a wordless acknowledgment before the ship moves on and the distance opens between you once more. The harbour entrance looms before you now, the two moles reaching out from the shore like arms welcoming you home, and you steer the boat toward the centre of the channel, the oars working steadily, the tide pushing you along. The water changes colour as you pass between the moles, the deep, clear blue-green of the open sea giving way to the paler, milkier green of the inner basin, and the smell of the water changes too, the clean, mineral scent of the deep now overlaid with the richer, more complex smells of the harbour, fish brine from the processing sheds, wet timber from the docks, the dry, dusty scent of grain from the great warehouses, the faint, sour tang of old rope and accumulant smells of many peep note. These smells are so familiar to you that you notice them only as a single, combined sensation, the smell of home, the smell of the place where you belong. You row past the first of the moored boats inside the harbour, their hulls rising and falling with the gentle swell that penetrates the entrance, their rigging making soft, metallic sounds as the breeze stirs the lines against the masts. A few men are still working on their boats, mending nets or scrubbing decks or simply sitting and watching the evening come, and they look up as you pass, their faces familiar, their names known to you, though no words are exchanged. The silence between you is comfortable, the silence of shared work and shared understanding, and you row on through the gathering dusk, the oars dipping and rising, the water dripping and sparkling. The quay comes into view, the long stone-paved platform that runs along the inner edge of the harbour basin, and you can see your own dock jutting out from it, the wooden planks dark against the pale stone, the iron mooring ring waiting at its end. The street behind the quay is quiet now, the shops and workshops closed for the day, their shutters drawn, their goods stored away, and only a few figures move along the paving stones, walking slowly in the fading light. The smell of evening fires is stronger here, wood smoke and the scent of baking bread and cooking fish, and the first lamps are being lit in the windows of the insulae, their flames small and yellow and steady, casting a warm, welcoming glow that reflects in the darkening water. You steer the boat toward the dock, the oars making small, precise adjustments, and as you draw near you, ship the starboard oar and use the port oar alone to bring the boat alongside, the hull kissing the wooden pilings with a soft, scraping sound that is cushioned by the rope fenders you hung there long ago. You reach out and take hold of the dock, your fingers curling around the edge of the planking, and you pull the boat in close, holding it steady while you stand and move toward the bow to tie the mooring line to the ring. The knot is the same half hitch you have tied every day, your fingers making the loops without any need for thought, and when it is secure you give the line a brief, testing tug, feeling the familiar, solid resistance that tells you the boat is home and will stay where it is through the night. You straighten up and stand for a moment on the gently rocking deck, looking out across the harbour basin at the lights reflecting in the water and the dark, peaceful shapes of the boats and the buildings, and you feel the day settle around you, complete and quiet and good. You step up from the boat onto the wooden dock. The transition from the unstable, living surface of the water to the solid, unmoving planks feeling strange for a moment, as it always does. Your legs still expecting the gentle rock and sway of the swells, even though the dock does not move. The wood is warm under your sandals from the long afternoon sun, and it creaks softly under your weight. A low, familiar sound that is answered by the quiet lapping of the water against the pilings below. You stand on the dock for a moment, letting your body adjust to the stillness, and then you turn back to the boat to begin the work of bringing the catch ashore. The baskets of fish wait in the stern, their contents gleaming dully in the fading light. The silver and grey and pale pink of the mullet and bream and bass all softened now by the dusk, the colours muted and blended together like the colours of the sky reflected in still water. You reach down and lift the first basket, the largest and heaviest one, and you feel the weight of it pull against your arms and shoulders, a solid, satisfying heft that is the measure of the day's work made tangible. The basket's willow withies are cool and dry under your fingers, the weave rough in places where the withies have splintered slightly, and the smell of the fish rises from it, clean and sharp and briny, the smell of the sea itself. You lift the basket over the gunwale and set it on the dock beside you. And then you reach for the next and the next, lifting each one with the same careful, steady motion until all the baskets are lined up on the wooden planks, a row of dark, rounded shapes that hold within them the fruit of the long day on the water. With the baskets ashore, you turn back to the boat for the final tasks that must be done before you can leave it for the night. The net is secure under its canvas cover. The oars are resting along the thwarts. The bailer and the ropes and the spare cordage are all in their proper places, but there is one more thing to do, a small ritual that you perform every evening without fail. You take up the wooden bucket that sits near the bow, a simple, stave-built container with a rope handle, and you lean over the side of the boat to fill it with seawater, the bucket sinking into the dark water with a soft, gurgling sound, the rope going slack in your hand. When it is full, you lift it back and pour the water across the floorboards, a thin silvery sheet that spreads out and runs into the gaps between the planks, carrying with it the few remaining fish scales and the small bits of seaweed and the faint slimy residue that the catch has left behind. You repeat this several times, filling and pouring, until the deck is clean and the water that drains away runs clear. And then you set the bucket aside and take up a stiff brush made of bundled twigs to scrub the few stubborn spots where fish blood or ink from the octopus has stained the wood, working the bristles in slow circular motions until the planks are as clean as they can be. The boat is now ready for the night, and you take a final moment to look it over, your eyes moving from the bow to the stern, checking that everything is in order. The mooring line is secure on its ring. The fenders are in place between the hull and the dock. The oars are stowed, the gear is covered, and the boat itself rides easily on the dark water, its hull rising and falling with the gentle, almost imperceptible swell that moves through the harbour. You place your hand on the gunwale one last time, feeling the smooth, worn wood under your palm, the wood that has been with you through so many days and so many holes, and then you turn away and gather the baskets, lifting the heaviest one first and balancing it against your hip, the others looped over your arms or carried in your free hand. The walk along the quay is short, the stone paving smooth and warm under your sandals, the evening air cool against your face and arms. The harbour is quiet now, the boats all moored and still, their occupants gone ashore, and the only sounds are the gentle slap of water against the stone, the distant cry of a single gull settling in for the night, and the soft, rhythmic tread of your own footsteps on the paving stones. The sky above the harbour has deepened to a rich, dark blue in the east, while the west still holds a faint, lingering glow of orange and gold, where the sun has disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars are now fully visible, bright and steady, their light reflecting in the dark water as tiny, wavering points of silver. The fishmonger's stall is set into the side of one of the larger warehouses near the end of the quay, a simple open-fronted space, with a heavy wooden-fronted space with a heavy wooden counter and a scale made of bronze that hangs from an iron beam overhead. The fishmonger himself is there, an older man with a round, weathered face and thick, strong hands, and he looks up as you approach, nodding a quiet greeting that you return with a nod of your own. There is no need for lengthy conversation, for the two of you have done this many times before, and the transaction unfolds with the same quiet, practiced ease that governs everything else in your day. You set the baskets on the counter one by one, and the fishmonger examines the catch, lifting a fish here and there to check its freshness, noting the clear eyes and the bright gills and the firm, unbruised flesh. He weighs the baskets on the bronze scale, the beam tilting and then leveling as he adds and removes the small iron weights, and then he names a price, a figure spoken in a low, calm voice, and you nod your acceptance. The coins change hands, a few small, warm pieces of bronze and silver that you slip into the leather pouch at your belt, and then the fishmonger's boys come to carry the baskets away into the back of the stall, where they will be packed in salt or taken fresh to the market in the morning. With the catch delivered and the coins secure, you walk back along the quay to the boat for the very last time, your footsteps slower now, your body tired, the pleasant, deep tiredness of a full day spent on the water. You step aboard one final time to spread the net out over the deck so that it can air fully during the night, the mesh loose and open, the lead beads resting lightly on the planks. You check the mooring line once more, pulling it tight and then loosening it just a little to allow for the rise and fall of the tide, and then you step back onto the dock and turn toward the street that leads away from the harbor and into the quiet, darkening town. The street is narrow and shadowed, the buildings on either side rising tall and close, their whitewashed walls now a soft, pale gray in the dusk. A few people pass you as you walk, their faces indistinct in the fading light, their voices low and murmuring, and you exchange brief wordless nods with those you recognize, the small quiet greetings of a community settling in for the night. The smell of evening meals fills the air, wood smoke and baking bread and something savory, perhaps a stew of lentils and herbs, and the scent makes you aware of your own hunger, a quiet, patient hunger that has been with you for the last hours of the work and that now begins to make itself known more clearly. You stop at the public fountain, a simple stone basin set into a niche in the wall, and you fill your clay flask with fresh water, the water gushing from the carved spout in a cool, clear stream that splashes against the basin and sends up a fine, cool mist. You drink deeply, the water cold and clean, washing away the salt taste that has been on your lips all day, and then you fill the flask again and cork it tightly, slinging its carrying strap over your shoulder. The walk continues, past the closed workshops and the shuttered shops, past the small shrine in the wall where the sprig of rosemary has been replaced by a fresh one, its leaves still green and fragrant, past the insula where a woman leans from an upper window, calling softly to someone in the street below. Your own insula rises before you, its familiar weathered facade dark against the sky, and you push open the heavy wooden door and step into the dim, cool stairwell. The stairs are worn and uneven, the stone steps cut in their centers from the passage of many feet over many years, and you climb them slowly, your legs heavy, your hand trailing along the cool, rough wall. On the second landing you pause for a moment to catch your breath, and through the narrow slit window you can see a sliver of the harbor, the water dark and still, the masts of the boats like thin black lines drawn against the deep blue of the evening sky. Then you continue upward, past the third floor, where a baby is crying somewhere behind a closed door, its voice thin and distant, and up to the fourth floor, where your own door waits at the end of the short, narrow corridor. The door opens with the familiar, slight scrape of wood against stone, and you step into your small, whitewashed room, the space dim and quiet, lit only by the last faint glow of the sky that comes through the narrow window. You set the clay flask on the stool by your bed and you take off your sandals, placing them side by side near the door, and you cross the room to the window and stand there for a moment, looking out at the harbour below. The water, a dark silver-grey sheet that reflects the first stars and the faint, warm glow of the lamps in the windows of the buildings along the quay. The lighthouse at the harbour entrance is now lit, its fire a bright, steady point of orange that stands out against the deepening blue of the night. And you watch it for a while, the way you always do, letting its calm, constant presence settle over you. Your meal is simple, the same meal you eat every evening, and you prepare it with the same slow, careful movements that you have used all day. The round of dark bread you break into pieces, the cheese you unwrap from its fig leaf and cut into thin slices with the small iron knife you keep on the shelf, the last of the olives you arrange in a small, neat pile. You eat slowly, sitting on the edge of your bed, the food tasting good and real and satisfying after the long day on the water, and you drink the cool, fresh water from the flask, the water tasting nothing like the sea, tasting of stone and earth and the deep hidden springs from which it came. When the meal is finished, you undress in the dim room, hanging your tunic on its peg by the door, and lying down on the thin mattress stuffed with wool, the sheet cool and clean against your tired skin. The room is quiet, the sounds of the town fading as the night deepens, and through the open window comes the soft, distant murmur of the sea, a sound that is less a noise and more a presence, a constant, gentle breath that has been with you every night of your life. You lie on your back with your arms at your sides, your legs stretched out, your body heavy and loose and deeply, pleasantly tired, and you let your eyes close, feeling the slow rhythmic pull of sleep drawing near. The day is over, the work is done, the boat is ready for tomorrow, and the sea will still be there when you wake, just as it always is, just as it always has been, and you let yourself sink into the quiet, into the dark, into the dark, into the deep, peaceful rest that comes after a day spent well on the water.